What's up, guys? Marcus here with BlackOvis. I'm here with Dan Staton. We're at his hometown, his home quarters. We came up here to visit him and just get into the nitty-gritty of what he does on a daily basis. And right now we are wanting to continue the ever controversial discussion of mechanical versus fixed broadheads.
Oh yeah.
Everyone's got a dog in the fight here, and we just wanted to talk about it, see what we both think, and go over, I guess, the pros and cons of both, because it's not really one's better than the other. They're situational.
Sure. Yeah. I think weight of arrows, you have kind of that heavy versus light crowd, which I don't even know what a heavy arrow is or a light arrow. Mm-hmm. Then you have the crowd of like expandable, mechanical versus fixed. Out of, for fun, just to get you guys riled up, I would say in my experience, an expandable does leave you vulnerable for, it decreases your margin of error. Mm-hmm. You really can't go through a scap, in my opinion, with an expandable. They take more energy to get a pass through, and they don't always pass through.
Yep.
They leave great entry holes, but I'm not talking about the positives right now. I'm talking about the negatives, and I just don't think they penetrate and get holes on both sides of the animal. I think they are really nice for people that don't know how to tune their bows, and they throw a fixed on and they shoot at 30 and it's 6 inches to the right of their fill point, and they get frustrated and say, I'm just going to put an expandable on. And I understand that. Like, that's very frustrating. But if you can dive in deeper and figure out, well, why is that? Because a fixed will expose your tune. I do like that. Or it'll expose a bad arrow, a flyer, or something where it's just, it needs to be knock tuned, or maybe it's just not a good arrow and you throw it out of the batch. But fixed will give you a little bit more of a margin of error. We are humans. We do err. We do get pretty excited when the moment of truth happens, and things can happen fast and can go wrong. Bow hunting is 100% about failure and how you overcome it. And so if you're not good with failing, you probably shouldn't bow hunt, because it's an art form of failure.
It is.
And I love that. That's why I keep coming back. But if I'm really honest with myself, I think you owe it to some of these bigger game species out west to try to get a fixed triangle hole through them. So a triangle would mean probably 3-blade-ish, somewhere in there. It packs a pretty good punch, but no matter what broadhead you shoot, like, I don't care, please shoot the most sharpest thing you can. We're not having a Dr. Ashby conversation and the 12 things that you need to penetrate, because number one will always be sharp. And a broadhead needs to be one that you are delicate taking out of the package, because it's so sharp, it will cut you. That's what you need to be sending downrange more than anything. But what's your thoughts on expandables?
That's a good question. I mean, you're right. Expandables, you're not going to have as much margin for error with those. They're not going to expose your flaws like a fixed blade will, based off of how you're torquing your bow or the tune on the bow itself, which has many different aspects. But I shoot a lot of expandables. Because I love the downrange accuracy. And that's not to say that you can't get that with a fixed blade, because I know you can. It just takes dialing in your setup. Yeah. But I love, one thing that I focus on, and I know that we have slightly different views here, but one thing I focus on is that entry and exit. And I want as big of a hole as possible. And you're right, mechanicals, they do have a tough time penetrating a scapula, as in they won't.
Yeah.
But the entry and exit wound is a really important feature for me, because I want a blood trail that is just crazy. And that's one reason that I lean towards that mechanical a little bit more. I mean, the ones I'm currently shooting, they've got a 2.2 inch cut diameter, which is huge. The deer that I shot this last year, I mean, when I was looking at the hole afterwards, it was just catastrophic.
Yeah.
But again, you're sacrificing something somewhere. I shoot a lot of mechanicals just because I love that downrange accuracy off the bat, and I feel like I can dial in that setup really well. But again, it depends on what you're hunting. And I actually shot the Grim Reaper Mini Mag on a couple turkeys this last fall, and I loved it. It's a front deploying system.
Yep.
Opposed to a lot of mechanicals that are rear, but I loved it. It was great.
I think a front deploying mechanical would make sense. Like if I were to pick an expandable, I would definitely go with Grim Reaper. They have history being made in America. One of the guys that works there I know very well, one of the best bow hunters I know. Fatal Steel is devastating. I think the cutting diameter is almost 2 inches. You can just see that it's chisel tipped. Chisel tipped has definitely proven time and time again to get in through tough places, because there are a lot of ribs blocking vitals. You may smack right in the middle. You want to be able to crush that rib and get into the good stuff. And so I do think that Fatal Steel from Grim Reaper would make the most sense if I were to go shoot an expandable. And animals that I have no problem shooting expandables are turkeys, 100%. Need to open those up. It's not a penetration issue. It's just get a biggest hole in an animal that has the smallest vitals ever. And they're tough. They're tough suckers. White-tailed deer, I probably could be convinced to shoot an expandable. Certainly antelope expandable, mule deer expandable, but that's about where I draw the line. Some bears, like black bear hunting, expandable would make sense because they're pretty soft. There's not a lot of, unless you hit the shoulder, bears, you just need as big a hole as possible on a bear because their hair is sponge. They soak up all the blood even if you make a really good shot. So an expandable is going to give you an opportunity to get more blood on the ground and find that animal. But when it comes to elk, I'm not shooting expandable. I've done it twice. I've had failure on both. And I know that I don't always make a perfect 11 ring shot on an elk. And so if I need a little bit of margin of error, or if I want to take a harsh quartering away shot, or maybe even sneak a quartering 2 in, frontals, any of those type of like controversial shots, it's still got to be with a fixed broadhead. I need that forgiveness, that margin of error, and I don't mind taking the extra steps. In fact, I actually rely on a fixed broadhead to tell me that my bow is tuned. And I just kind of skip a lot of the weed stuff with knock tuning and spine indexing and put a fixed broadhead on there and shoot all my arrows at longer distances and figure out what's going on with my setup.
One thing I have seen with it, with a 2-blade, is sometimes that slit that goes through the animal can close a bit easier.
Oh yeah.
Which I know on a fixed blade, you're gonna see a big difference there because you're not only punching a hole, but those 3 different edges are creating a wound channel that just differs from that 2-blade. So there is a difference there as well. I guess when you're thinking about blade surface, number of blades, what's your strategy there?
That's tough. The cut on contact is definitely something that's exciting. Like I get excited about a 2-blade, but I understand they penetrate better than a 3-blade, than a 4-blade, and there's no denying that. But if I get all the penetration in the world, but there's not an ounce of blood on the ground, I better be a really good tracker. You know what I mean? And sometimes I just feel like we're causing hypovolemic shock in an animal. We need as much blood to leave the container as possible. Or we need as much blood to pull inside the container where the vitals are. So I like 3-blade over 2 blades just because of the amount of blood I can get on the ground. There's some great 2 blades out there that have bleeders, like Iron Will for sure. And that guy's done a lot of testing on penetration, and there's no doubt about it. But I like a 3-blade. I get great flight with them, and I get that like triangle hole that makes a lot of sense. 4 blades, I've killed bears and elk with 4 blades, like Grim Reaper, Micro Hades, 4 blades. Done and regular. Those have been really successful for me, but I can shoot a 3-blade more accurately, better flight characteristics, longer distance, like you with the mechanical. Well, I get that when I'm measuring a 4 versus 3. I get just a little bit better flight characteristics past 50 yards, and I'm getting the chisel tip. So that 3-to-1 ratio you'll hear about a lot of the times with the broadheads is, I think it's one of Ashby's principles, is the broadhead's got to be sharp, and then the cutting distance, that 3-to-1 ratio, meaning it's something kind of like this angle where this is 3 times as long as
it is wide.
Yes.
Yep.
And that's important to have that 3-to-1 ratio, but sharpness ultimately, there's so many options when it comes to broadheads that I think if you're gonna do yourself a favor, get like a sample pack, test them all, tinker with it, find out what you think's gonna spit out of your bow the best. What gives you the most confidence going out the door? Don't listen to anyone else. Listen to you. And if you are going to listen to someone, vet them. Make sure they're a good resource that has a lot of experience. And, ultimately, at the end of the day, do whatever you need to do to leave the field being confident that you're going to one shot, one kill your animal.
This conversation continues after we end it. And hopefully it jumps to you. Hopefully you're doing what Dan is suggesting, is get different broadheads, test them out. It's the only way to find out and truly know what's going to work best for your hunting setup and work best on that animal that you're trying to harvest. Make sure to check the links below. We'll have links to our broadhead category. You can see everything that we have on BlackOvis. Let us know if you have any questions. We'd love to hear your opinions. We're sure they'll differ from ours, as our opinions differ from each other.
Yeah.
The conversation continues. Thanks for watching.